My father disowned me and accused me of wasting my potential when I chose to leave our wealthy family business to marry a farmer. Don't expect a single cent from us, he shouted as I walked out, determined to start a new chapter on Jack's farm. A few months later, my mother sat in our grand living room, dabbing her eyes with a monogrammed handkerchief. My younger sister, Madison, looked at me like I'd gone completely insane. My name is Sarah Mitchell, and at 35 years old, I had finally found the strength to follow my heart, even if it meant walking away from the privileged life my family had built for me. After spending 15 years trying to be the perfect daughter, a Stanford Business School graduate, a vice president at Mitchell Enterprises, I decided to choose love over status. That decision sent my family into an uproar. "He's just a farmer, Sarah," my father sneered when I told him. "Is that what you want? To throw away everything we've built for you to become a farmer's wife?" "Jack isn't just a farmer," I replied, fighting to keep my voice steady. "He runs one of the most successful organic farms in the valley. He's educated, driven." My father cut me off. "While you were learning to run a billion-dollar company, he was probably learning how to shovel manure. Is that really the future you want?" Ironically, I had met Jack at one of my father's own charity events. He wasn't supposed to be there, he was filling in for a local business owner, but he caught my attention immediately. Unlike the other men at these events, who loved to talk about their stock portfolios and yachts, Jack spoke passionately about sustainable farming and protecting the environment. "I've already made my decision," I told my family firmly. "I'm moving in with Jack next week. The wedding is in 3 months, and I hope you'll be there." "If you leave," my father said coldly, "don't expect to keep your position here, your trust fund, or anything else from this family." I took one last look at the office, the family photos on the walls, the sweeping views of downtown Seattle, and placed my ID badge on his desk. "Goodbye, Dad. Mom. Madison." As I walked out, the sound of my heels echoed in the marble hallway. Behind me, I could hear my mother quietly crying and Madison muttering, "She's lost it." Most people can't understand why I gave up a 7-figure salary and a penthouse apartment to live on a farm. But the truth is, these last 6 months on Jack's farm have been more fulfilling than 20 years in corporate America ever were. Adjusting to farm life wasn't easy. Trading my Tesla for a pickup truck, my designer heels for work boots, and my luxury apartment for Jack's century-old farmhouse was a shock to the system. The first time I had to help deliver a calf at 3 a.m., I instinctively reached for my phone to call a driver, before remembering that this was my life now. But this life was real. It had substance, something my old life had always lacked. My family's reaction was predictable. My mom bombarded me with texts about suitable matches from her social circle. Madison sent me job postings from competing companies as if to save me from myself. My father, of course, didn't say a word, but his secretary called monthly to remind me of what I had given up, the connections, the security, the trust fund. What they refused to understand was that Jack wasn't some simple farmer. Yes, he worked the land, but he also held degrees in agricultural science and business. His farm supplied premium organic produce to high-end restaurants across several states, and he had turned his grandfather's failing operation into a model for sustainable farming. But in my family's world, success only counted if it was earned in a boardroom. Wedding invitations went out last week. My mom returned hers with a note that read, "I can't watch you throw your life away." Madison called to politely decline, citing a business trip that she had clearly scheduled to avoid attending. My father's invitation was returned unopened. One afternoon, as Jack and I were reviewing property documents, I noticed something surprising. The farm's boundaries included a pristine lakefront area, the very same land my father had been trying to acquire for his new resort project. "Oh, yeah," Jack said casually when I brought it up. "Your dad's company has been trying to buy that land for months. They've offered way above market value, but my grandfather made a promise to keep it agricultural. It's some of the best soil in the region." I sat in stunned silence as the pieces fell into place. My father's ambitious resort couldn't move forward without this land, and it belonged to the man he dismissed as irrelevant. The next morning, while I was gathering eggs from the chicken coop, still marveling at how my hands, once manicured to perfection, now carried calluses. I got the call I'd been expecting. "Sarah, darling," my mom began, her voice uncharacteristically sweet. "We've been thinking about things. Perhaps we were too harsh. Why don't you and Jack come to dinner on Sunday? We'd love to get to know him better." I nearly dropped the basket of eggs. After months of cold silence, their sudden change of heart was highly suspicious. My suspicions were confirmed when my dad came on the line. "Princess," he said, his voice unusually warm, "we should give this young man of yours a chance. We're family, after all." Standing there in muddy boots, surrounded by clucking chickens, I understood the truth. They'd discovered that Jack owned the land. This wasn't about reconciling, it was about saving their project. That evening, as Jack sat at his desk working on plans for next season's crops, I told him about the dinner invitation. "Your parents want to meet me?" he asked, surprised. "After all this time? What changed?" I hesitated before answering. "I think they found out about the land, and we need to talk about something important." Before I could explain, Jack's phone rang. It was his lawyer, calling to discuss another offer from Mitchell Enterprises, this one double the previous amount. As always, Jack declined politely. When he hung up, he looked at me. "What's going on, Sarah?" I took a deep breath. "That resort your lawyer mentioned, it's my dad's project. Without your land, it can't happen." Jack's expression shifted, but instead of anger, a small smile formed. "So that's why they suddenly want to play nice," he said, shaking his head. "Your dad has been sending increasingly aggressive offers for months, never mentioning who he was. I guess he didn't want to admit his daughter was marrying the stubborn farmer who keeps turning him down." Sunday dinner at the Mitchell mansion was as theatrical as I had expected. My mom went all out, the finest china, an elaborate centerpiece of fresh flowers, and even my childhood favorite dessert. My dad greeted us at the door with a smile so forced it could have cracked marble. "Jack, my boy," he said, clapping Jack on the shoulder like an old friend. "Welcome to our home. Sarah's told us so much about you." I nearly rolled my eyes. Months of silence and insults, and now he was suddenly hospitable? Jack, as always, handled it with grace, surveying the lavish dining room with polite curiosity. "You've got a beautiful home, Mr. Mitchell," Jack said, nodding toward the garden visible through the windows. "Those roses out front are stunning, but you might want to keep an eye out for black spot," it looked like it was starting to spread. My mom froze, her smile faltering. Criticizing her roses was practically sacrilege, but Jack was right. I'd noticed the same thing on our way in. Over dinner, my dad carefully steered the conversation toward business. "Jack, your work with sustainable farming is impressive," he began. "Have you ever considered scaling up? With the right investment, I think you could take things to the next level." Jack didn't miss a beat. "Actually, we're already expanding," he said casually. "Just broke ground on a new greenhouse last week. Self-funded, of course." I nearly laughed into my wine glass. Jack hadn't mentioned any new greenhouse project to me. He was playing my father's game, and he was winning. Finally, my dad laid his cards on the table. "About that lakefront property," he said, swirling his bourbon as if the subject had just crossed his mind. "I've got some exciting proposals that could benefit everyone. Why don't we step into my study to talk numbers?" "With all due respect, sir," Jack said, setting down his fork, "that land isn't for sale, at any price. It's not about money. It's about keeping a promise and preserving something important." My dad's mask of cordiality slipped for a moment. "Everything has a price, son. Name yours." "Not everything," Jack said firmly. "Not integrity, not promises, and certainly not your daughter's trust." The silence that followed was almost deafening. My mom's hand hovered over her glass, her knuckles white. My dad's face darkened, and for a moment, I thought he might actually explode. "Let me explain how the world works," he said, his voice tight. "That resort will bring jobs, tourism, and development to this area. Are you really going to let stubborn pride stand in the way of progress?" Jack leaned back in his chair, calm and unwavering. If by progress you mean paving over some of the most fertile land in the region, displacing families who've farmed here for generations, then yes, I will. People can't eat money, Mr. Mitchell, but they can eat what we grow. I reached for Jack's hand under the table, squeezing it. This was why I had chosen him, not just for his integrity, but for his unwavering commitment to things that mattered. Sarah, my mom said, her tone desperate, surely you can make him understand. Think about your future, your children's future. I am thinking about the future, Mom, I said firmly. Just not the one you had planned for me. My dad slammed his glass onto the table, his patience gone. If you leave now, don't come crawling back when you're tired of this little experiment. There won't be a place for you here anymore. There hasn't been a place for me here for a long time, Dad, I said softly. I just didn't want to admit it. Jack and I stood, preparing to leave. Madison finally broke her silence, gesturing at the lavish dining room. You're really choosing dirt and tractors over all of this? I turned to her, my voice calm but resolute. No, Madison. I'm choosing love and meaning over empty luxury. One day, I hope you'll understand the difference. The fallout from that dinner sent ripples through Seattle's business circles. My dad didn't take our defiance lightly. He leaned on his considerable influence, pressuring local banks to deny us loans, spreading rumors about Jack's farm, and even trying to lure Jack's clients away with promises of cheaper suppliers. But Jack's reputation was unshakable, and so was my resolve. A few weeks later, as I sorted through the mail, I came across a thick envelope from Mitchell Enterprises. Inside was a proposal, an offer to buy only part of the farm, specifically the lakefront property. The letter promised a compromise that would allow us to keep the rest. Attached was a handwritten note from my dad, "Be reasonable, Sarah. This way, everyone wins." I was still fuming when Jack walked in from the fields, holding up his tablet. "You need to see this," he said, handing it to me. The screen displayed an email from a major organic food distributor. They wanted to partner with us exclusively, praising our sustainable farming practices and top-quality produce. The contract would triple our revenue almost overnight. "This is what I've been working on instead of your dad's resort," Jack said, grinning. "We don't need his kind of progress, we're making our own." That evening, as the sun set over our fields, I drafted a response to my dad. I included photos of the lakefront soil analysis, testimonials from local families benefiting from our farming co-op, and projected revenues from our new distributor. "We're not selling the land, Dad. Keep your resort. We're building something far more valuable." A few days later, we had an unexpected visitor. Madison pulled up in her sleek Mercedes, looking completely out of place on our dirt driveway. She stepped out, eyeing the scene, me in jeans and muddy boots, helping Jack load produce onto the truck. "You look happy," she said, almost in disbelief. "Really happy. And that new deal? The board is talking about it. You're making waves in the industry, just not the way Dad expected." It was the first time I'd seen even a hint of understanding from her. She stayed for dinner, asking real questions about our work and listening to our vision for the farm's future. As she left, she turned back to me. "Maybe, you could show me around the farmer's market sometime." For the first time in years, it felt like a crack had formed in the wall dividing us. A year after that infamous family dinner, I found myself standing at a podium at a sustainable agriculture conference. Our farm had become a model of success, and I had been invited to share how we'd grown while staying true to our values. As I scanned the audience, I spotted a familiar figure sitting in the back row, my dad, conspicuously out of place in his tailored suit among the crowd of farmers and environmentalists. Our eyes met briefly, but I moved on without acknowledging him. I spoke about our journey, the hard decisions, and the risks we'd taken. I talked about how our co-op program had helped 5 other families transition to organic farming, and how our new greenhouse operation allowed us to supply fresh produce year-round. During the Q&A session, someone asked me, "Weren't you scared to leave everything behind?" I glanced briefly at my dad before answering. The most rewarding paths in life often require the most courage. Choosing what's right over what's easy can be terrifying, but the results can be extraordinary. After the conference, Madison met me for coffee. She'd become a regular at the farm, helping at the farmers' market and even taking an interest in some of Jack's projects. She was different, more relaxed, less guarded. The polished VP facade had faded, replaced by someone who seemed more authentic. "Dad's resort plans officially collapsed," she said, stirring her latte. "Once the investors realized the lakefront wasn't for sale, they backed out. But here's the thing, Mom's been reading up on organic gardening. I even caught her watching a documentary about hydroponics." I laughed, picturing my mother, who once wore gloves to handle potting soil, trying to navigate a greenhouse. Madison leaned forward, her expression more serious. "She misses you, Sarah. Dad, too, though he'd never admit it. The house feels so empty. It's like all the success they worked for doesn't mean much without you there." Her words lingered in my mind long after she left. For years, I'd tried to fit into their version of success, but now they were starting to see the cracks in that image. 2 months later, we received a surprising piece of mail. It was an environmental impact study commissioned by Mitchell Enterprises, outlining the potential damage their resort would have caused to the valley's water table and soil. At the bottom was a handwritten note from my dad. "You were right about the land. Let's talk." That weekend, my parents arrived at the farm. My mom stepped out of the car in jeans, something I had never seen her wear before. My dad looked tired, his usual commanding presence softened. They stood on the porch, taking in the windmill, solar panels, and sprawling fields. "Your mother wants to see the greenhouse," my dad said gruffly. Jack gave them a tour, explaining our hydroponic systems and how we used vertical farming to maximize space. My mom asked questions about herbs she was trying to grow in her windowsill garden, genuinely curious. My dad remained quiet, but I caught him nodding in approval at our irrigation system. Over dinner, my dad cleared his throat. "The board has been discussing ways to incorporate sustainability into our operations," he said cautiously. "There's growing demand for it, and we could use someone who knows what they're doing." I blinked in surprise. Was this an olive branch? "We're not selling the land, Dad," I said firmly. "I know," he replied, surprising me again. "That's not what I'm asking. The company needs to change, to adapt. And, you seem to know how to do that." Later, as Jack and my dad discussed ideas for a potential collaboration, my mom pulled me aside. "I thought you were throwing your life away," she admitted, her voice soft. "But seeing you here, the way you talk about this place. I've never seen you so alive. I'm proud of you, Sarah." The sun was setting as they prepared to leave. My dad paused by the old oak tree near the driveway, planted decades ago by Jack's grandfather. "You know," he said, glancing at the sturdy branches, "I spent my life building things that scrape the sky. Maybe I should have spent more time thinking about what grows from the ground. These days, the farm is more than just a business. It's a community hub, a place where people come to learn, connect, and find purpose." We've expanded into education programs, hosting workshops on sustainable farming for young entrepreneurs and families looking for a fresh start. Madison now works full-time with us, managing partnerships with other farms and organizing community events like farm-to-table dinners and harvest festivals. My mom oversees the flower garden, and to my astonishment, she has even started teaching floral arrangement classes to local kids. My dad hasn't traded his corporate world for farming, but he's become an ally. Mitchell Enterprises are now partners with small farms across the state, showing that profitability and sustainability can coexist. Last month, he shared their new mission statement with me, growing success from the ground up. At a recent harvest festival, I watched my dad teaching my 3-year-old daughter how to pick strawberries, while my mom led a group of children through her flower garden. Madison was giving tours of our newest greenhouse, and Jack was explaining crop rotation techniques to a group of eager visitors. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Jack joined me on the porch, his arm wrapping around my shoulders. "Think you made the right choice?" he asked, grinning. I watched as my dad lifted our daughter onto his shoulders, both of them laughing as they wandered toward the flower garden. The fields glowed golden in the fading light, the air rich with the scent of ripening fruit and wildflowers. "I didn't just make the right choice," I said, leaning into Jack. "I helped them see that there was room for both the life I wanted and the family I love. Sometimes, the hardest decisions lead to the most rewarding outcomes. I didn't just save a piece of land, I found a way to grow a life I could truly be proud of." Thank you for watching the video. Subscribe and turn on notifications to be the first to have radish and real stories with you. Have a great day.